Hey guys, welcome back to OrmsTV, and today we are checking the beautiful Leica SL2-S.
Yeah, and this is the Leica SL2S post version 2.0 firmware. So they've updated some things, tweaked some things, made it a better overall camera, and we're going to run you guys through all of those specs, what they mean and how they perform.
Alright, so now running through in specs in this model, this is quite similar to the SL2, but with some changes. So you've got 24 megapixel, but with a backside illuminated sensor, extra dynamic range and extra low light. Touching on low light, with your ISO on this guy, you're looking at 50 to 100,000. Frame rates, you've got 25 in electronic mode and 9 in mechanical. And then autofocus points. This is 225 selective autofocus points, and Leica is adding the face, body and eye detection.
Now jumping over to the video specifications, and this is actually where a lot of the changes with the new firmware version 2.0 came into play. Leica really bumped it up significantly from where it was. So as it stands right now, this unit will record 4K 60 10-bit 422 internally. They've also added H.265 codec and long op to this unit, so that will give you about the same quality as what you would traditionally get with the all intra, but at about half the size, in terms of disk space. So this is now running at about 200 megabit per second encoding on this unit. You can also output that 4K 60 externally over the HDMI port, which is very, very handy. It's all pretty standard these days, but what isn't so standard is that when you do record 4K on this camera, you get a crop. So you're cropping down to about an APS-C size frame on this, and we kind of get it, it is a Leica, it's not, massively video orientated, but it is still a little bit unfortunate to see that in there. Everywhere else though, pretty decent. You've also got 5.5 stops of in-body image stabilization, which really helps when you're hand-holding, filming with this unit. Now, as part of that firmware update, that version 2.0 that we keep talking about, Leica has also bumped up the autofocus performance specifically for video. And they've enhanced the face tracking and the eye tracking and that kind of thing. And it's better than what it was, definitely, but still not fantastic. And the reason for that is that this unit uses a contrast detect autofocus system and not phase detect. So it's never going to be as good as the tracking autofocus that you get out of your Sonys and your Canons and your Nikons. And again, unfortunate, but at the end of the day, it is a Leica and they are more stills focused than what they are video focused. So you might be able to forgive that, or you just switch over and manual focus the unit. All in all, as a video package, it's okay. It's really okay. It's good for a Leica. In terms of industry as a whole, it's okay.
So touching on ergonomics on this body, visually this is almost identical to the SL2. Now differences is going to be that this Leica logo here is painted black, so it might be a little bit more discreet. But going through it, you've got two command dials, quite a nice big knob here at the back. I actually really like the touchscreen. It's quite responsive going through it. They've kept it kind of minimalist, right? You've got two SD card slots, which is kind of the norm and the standard these days in the pro industry. You've got a full HDMI port, which, like you said in the video specs, that's going to be quite important. You've got a headphone output and also a microphone input. Quite standard these days as well, you've got your USB-C, so that actually means your data transfer is going to be nice and fast, but not only that, you can actually charge the camera via this port as well.
Yeah, then in terms of the actual build and construction over here, it is typical Leica, really. You've got a full aluminium body with a magnesium alloy subframe. It's heavy, it's solid, it's big, it's chunky, it fits into your hand absolutely beautifully. In terms of myself using this camera, I find the two little shortcut buttons at the front next to the lens very easy to reach. I know for some people with smaller hands, it's a little bit weird because you have to break your grip to get to those two buttons. But if you've got bigger hands, they are actually very nice to get to. Now, what you'll notice in terms of the buttons as well is that most of the buttons on this unit are unlabeled, and that is because every single button on here can be customized, and it's actually really nice, and it's a very intuitive way to do it. If you've got the camera on, you literally hold the button down for a couple of seconds, a menu will pop up, and then you can assign a value or a function to that button, and it's really, really nice. Everything else on here is exactly what you expect. It feels like an expensive, well-built, rugged camera, and it is. It really seems to be. From all the reports, everything that's out there about this unit, it seems like they can absolutely go to war and have no issues whatsoever. You have the little LCD at the top giving you readout of your functions and your settings, so that's quite nice. Now I know you like the touchscreen on the back, as do I, but it does not flip out. And in a camera like this, which Leica is trying to be a little bit more video focused, that's a bit of a miss.
Yeah.
Definitely a bit of a miss. I get it. It keeps it nice and slick and makes the whole back panel here look very Leica M, keeping that traditional look. Fine, so be it. But if you're going to make a video-centric camera, give me some of those video features. It has a little joystick on the back here, which is also actually really nice. The way that you can go through menus with this or press it in to set your back button autofocus or something like that to it. It's really, really nice. All in all, in terms of the build and handling on this camera, it's really nice. Like, it's really, really well done. It's solid and it feels like it'll last for absolute ever.
And it is made to shoot in hardcore weather conditions. It's got an IP54 rating for weather seals.
Yeah, and I mean, that is like industry leading. I mean, you can stand in a monsoon storm with this thing and it'll survive. It is very impressive stuff.
So seeing that we got most of the specs out of the way, let's talk about some of the positive, the stuff we really enjoyed. This is actually my first time shooting on the SL system, and I actually really enjoyed shooting some photos on this. I really like the simplicity of the body. It's really easy. The menu was very quick, and it was very quick to understand sort of the Leica system.
Yeah, so in the past, I've shot on the SL2, which is essentially the same camera, just a higher megapixel variant. And in terms of the stills performance, it's actually very positive. Yeah. On the still side, the autofocus works relatively well, especially if you discard the face tracking and that kind of thing. If you're shooting traditional spot autofocus, I think it's absolutely perfect. The images come out sharp, they come out crisp, the color rendition is good, as is traditional on Leica. Your black and whites look really nice coming out of it. Maybe not as good as what you get on the M's, but really good for the SL system as a whole. And of course, coupling that with these lenses, you know, these SL system lenses, they are phenomenal, as you'd come to expect with any Leica unit. They're big, they're chunky, but they are sharp as hell. They are incredible. I absolutely love them. And on that side, it really is an overall positive experience. Yeah. How did you find shooting video with this unit?
So that's where some of the sort of kinks maybe came into play when we were shooting. We were shooting basketball, as you could see with some of the photos and video that we'll be showing you now. And the autofocus tracking, especially when it comes to face or body detection, it kind of seemed like it was hunting. And that is due to, like you said in the beginning of the video, the contrast detect autofocus system that's built into the unit. If they maybe added the phase detect, we probably would have seen a little bit more of a smooth transition when it comes to autofocus.
Yeah, look, for contrast detect, it's maybe one of the best contrast detect systems that I've used ever, but at the end of the day, contrast detect is never going to be as good as a phase detect system. It simply cannot do it. And it is for the simple fact that to get a sharp contrast reading on these sensors, the camera effectively has to focus past the point of highest contrast and then pull back to it. And this creates a couple of issues in this camera. So when you are tracking a subject moving towards you, diagonally towards you, it is going to lose it, because as it moves through that focal plane, the camera is going to have to try and go past that point the whole time. The same thing happens if you're shooting stills and if you're shooting bursts specifically, and you want to autofocus in between. I think this unit drops down to like 5 shots if you want the autofocus.
For continuous tracking.
Yeah, and that is very unfortunate, specifically for a camera that is geared towards a sportier type of audience. And I think that's kind of the main letdown on this unit, is just that autofocus system, especially when you're trying to shoot video with it.
Another positive for me is showing that Leica is really interested in updating the camera and updating the firmware quite swiftly after the launch. So it kind of shows you that they're really invested in this camera and they want to improve things. Now, going back to the negatives for me, it's a big deal was the battery life. We only had one battery on this shoot and it was completely almost dead after we shot only a couple of video and a couple of shots. So hopefully that's also something they can maybe tweak in the firmware, sort of put some power distribution somewhere else. Another thing for me, as I mentioned, I do have a little bit of smaller hands, and some of these buttons were a little bit out of reach for me and a little bit uncomfortable to manage. But if you have bigger hands, you probably won't have that problem.
Yeah, now there is one positive for me on this camera, and it's a really, really big positive, and that is this viewfinder. Now this is a 5.76 million dot viewfinder, and it is glorious. It is genuinely one of the best viewfinders that I've ever used. It's bright, it's accurate, it's fast, it's incredibly smooth. I'm not getting any jitter out of it. It is a truly, truly fantastic viewfinder. And I kind of know where this viewfinder comes from because I've seen it before, but still, it's really nice to see it incorporated into this camera.
Now, jumping into the conclusion of this camera,
That's emotional.
I feel like I'm struggling to find out where this camera is really aimed for. Is it aimed at a professional photographer that shoots video occasionally? Or is it a pro cinematographer that might need a photo camera every now and then? Or is it someone that strictly just focuses on video? And I think on the photography side of things, even for 24 megapixel, this is a great camera. It's sharp, good quality, good performance. But the biggest issue for me when you look at the video side of things is going to come into continuous tracking. I think the camera with contrast detect is struggling a little bit, especially with action sport or movement.
Yeah. Now, talking about the conclusion, actually really, really struggles here on the inside. Now, as you guys would know, I am a Leica user and I have a Leica M system camera. And my big problem with this camera is that it doesn't feel like shooting with a Leica. Now let me explain this. When you are shooting with Leica, specifically on their M system, and I know some of this is down to the lenses, but it's also a very specific way that the image data is processed coming off that sensor. And it gives you a, I don't want to say unique, but it kind of is unique. It gives you a very specific look to your images. And if you know what you're looking for, you can spot it. And shooting with this camera here, you don't get that. And if you as an end user come into the SL system looking for that Leica look, that Leica experience, I don't think you're going to find it here. What you are going to find is a very capable stills camera, but a very capable stills camera maybe from a couple of years ago. Because what Leica is doing here feels like they're painting themselves into a bit of a corner. If you look at Leica's M system cameras, and even something like the Leica Q2, you're looking at cameras that don't really have competition in the market. The M system camera is a rangefinder camera with manual only focus lenses, and that's unique. Fuji tries to copy it here and there. There's a couple of niche manufacturers that try to put out something similar. But in that market segment, Leica stands alone. And that allows them to get away with a lot of things. Are those cameras the best cameras on the market? No, absolutely not. But when you are unique in your segment, even something objectively bad is characterful. And that is the advantage that they have in their traditional cameras that they output. They can charge Leica money for those cameras because you cannot get it anywhere else. You can't even get close. The problem with this is you can. You can go to Canon, Sony, Nikon, Fuji, Panasonic, and get something that is the same type of camera. Are you going to get the same lens quality? Maybe, maybe not. The new Sony G Master lenses and Canon's RF lenses are phenomenally sharp lenses and reproduce color incredibly accurately. In my opinion, this lens here is arguably still a little bit of a touch above, but the lens is not the issue here. The body itself is. And when you look at this body, you have to compare it against contemporary cameras because that is where they've positioned this. And that's where it becomes a problem, because I really struggle to recommend this system in a mirrorless performance range, where you have to compare this against stuff like the Canon EOS R5 or the Sony A1. There it really, really struggles. And to me, that's kind of sad. You know, I really wanted Leica to step out and come out with something unique, something that has that character, that has that Leica feel to it. And I know people in the comments are going to say, you know, the Leica feel is all made up and it's, you know, to justify what you spend on your cameras. And I get that. But at the end of the day, when I pick this up and I shoot with it, I don't feel like I'm shooting with a Leica. I could be shooting with a Panasonic or a Canon. It doesn't speak to me in that same special way. And as I said, that makes me a little bit sad.
So guys, that's our review on the Leica SL2-S. We really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like the video and comment if we missed anything.
Yeah guys, and as always, if you enjoy the content that we put out, please consider subscribing to our channel. It really helps us out a lot. So until next time guys, cheers.
Cheers.